Hello, and welcome to a guide to upskilling data curiosity to the masses. My name is Brittany Croth. I'm a manager of analytics and insights at Degreed. I graduated from Georgia Tech with a degree in industrial engineering, focusing on statistics and computational data analytics. I'm a power user of Domo, and I love to tell stories with data. I work with Domo editors across the company. In my local community, I'm best known for my herd of horses and donkeys. So we're gonna do some live demos in Domo today. So I picked a personal passion of mine, and we're gonna use some sample data from the US government on the adoption and sale of wild Mustangs and burros. I wanna share some specific examples with you on how to use Domo to drive data curiosity. Curiosity is often seen as an abstract idea. How do you make someone more curious? We can kickstart the conversation with this. Curiosity starts with confidence. Today we're going to cover a variety of topics with concrete takeaways, all related to building confidence with Domo. As a data team, you're asked to help with data requests from every department. And if your data team is anything like ours, the data requests just keep coming. Each time we answer a question, build a chart, or ship an entire dashboard, 10 more requests take its place. We're thrilled that people around the company are requesting data. But there are only so many hours in the day and only so many members on the data team. So what can we do? It all came down to this. We need more people able to answer questions. Across the company, people are asking all kinds of amazing questions. But there are only a few teams able to gather the data to answer those questions. So let's go find some people. First, it's important to understand what roles employees can have in Domo. We use 3 roles at Degreed. Participants are able to view what's already been created. They can adjust their view, such as by applying filters, but they can't make edits. Now, the editor role can build all kinds of charts and dashboards, which means they're able to answer questions. But with the data right in front of them, curiosity can take over, and they can also find new questions to ask. And then, of course, we have our admins, which is really your data team. They're the guides for the editors and create the confidence in the data's accuracy. So who should have editor access? Well, most companies end up on one of 2 extremes. On one side, you have a very locked down approach, where only your data teams have editor access. But if your data team is the only one finding insights, you're always going to have a bottleneck. A more locked down approach often comes with data governance, rules, procedures, and that can slow the process down even more and can make chart building feel restrictive and just plain not fun. On the other hand, you could create a wide open environment. Give the entire company editor access. Everyone can make cards at their own pace. But if there's zero data governance, you'll start to lose confidence in the data. Departments will create competing dashboards with dueling data that supposedly show the same metrics, but they have different values. A new team member won't know which dashboard to trust. At Degreed, we wanted to find the perfect Goldilocks option, so we created a guided approach. Anyone is allowed to be an editor after a short training session. We'll go over this training process in detail right here today. By having editors in every department, they can align their data priorities with their department needs. Since we're guiding this process, we can keep a close eye on data sets and dashboards to reduce dueling data. The best part of all, though, our editors will know the department's data better than anyone, so they're in the perfect position to turn decisions into data-driven decisions. We know that we need more editors, but not just any editors. We need data champions. Maybe start by reaching out to data-oriented roles embedded on other teams, like marketing analysts or financial planning analysts. Find the employees in your company who might already be comfortable working with data and see if they want to start working in Domo. You're looking for a data champion, someone that wants to drive building dashboards, someone that wants hands-on time with data and wants to learn to speak the language of data. Maybe it's someone who has shown a lot of interest in an already existing dashboard. Or maybe someone's making a lot of requests. Maybe there's someone that's continuously asking questions, especially those really deep questions that are digging 1 or 2 steps further into the data. Someone curious, logical, passionate about data. they are your data champions. With a guided approach, your data champions will be building the dashboards. But the data team has an incredibly important role to guide this process. Your data team provides the guardrails to allow the editors to build in Domo safely, quickly, and most importantly, confidently. So how does this work? You need to find the system that works for your team and your company. At Degreed, we chose to go with a light data governance strategy. It's not the wild, wild west in our Domo, but it's also not so restrictive that it hurts creativity. Editors have to feel confident that the process makes sense and is worthwhile. Needless forms and paperwork will chip away at their excitement to explore the data. The first procedure that we introduce our editors to is how to publish a new chart. So they start with an idea or a question. We often recommend starting small and keeping each chart focused on just one purpose. They're able to develop this new chart in a personal area of sandbox. We call ours an overview. This is an area that the editors can feel comfortable to try something new and hit that undo button a few times. When they're ready, they can place the chart into a work in progress area for feedback. We can gather feedback from their department, but we can also go through a peer review with an analyst on the data team to make it as awesome as it can be. Once it's ready, we publish the chart company-wide. Pages don't have to be company-wide, but at Degreed, we try to do it as much as possible. It helps to democratize our data far and wide, and it gets everyone on the same page. One thing we found with this process is that charts have a tendency to get stuck in work in progress. Maybe we keep adding and adding requirements instead of drawing a line in the sand and breaking enhancements off to a version 2. Or more likely, the data isn't quite perfect yet. At Degreed, we prefer to see data quality issues as an opportunity, not a problem. If unknown data is showing, publish the page anyways. Raise awareness. Use the dashboard for both its original purpose and to track down what's driving the unknowns. Something we like to do at Degreed is to create a separate table at the bottom of the page to track improvements in data quality. If your data loads are automated like ours, you'll be able to see the improvement automatically every time your data updates. Push your editors to focus on that very first chart. Find a question or metric that will have value, so we aren't just building charts to build charts. Allow your editors to be immediately successful and quickly get returns on their hard work in Domo. We've found that getting that first chart finished from sandbox to published is the biggest indicator of a successful repeat chart builder. Once they've built one chart, they'll be hooked for life. To get them there, the editor needs to feel confident that they know how to use the tool and confident that they can trust the data that they're using. Let's dive in some details on how you can use Domo to build up their confidence and therefore their data curiosity. We want to set up our editors for success, and that means training them. There are 3 areas that we're going to focus on for training. We're going to dive into all 3 of these in a lot of detail. We'll talk about training your editors analytically. What charts and metrics does the business need? What about Domo itself? Your BI tool. What buttons do they click to create the chart they want? And then finally, documentation. How can lots of editors from various departments all create one consistent look and feel? Your editors will be starting at a variety of levels when it comes to analytical knowledge, and we want them all to become experts. So how do we help them become more data literate and feel more comfortable speaking data? The best advice that I can give you is to create a place to store analytical resources. Degreed is an upskilling platform, so we drink our own champagne and we leverage our own product to do this. In this case, we use our learning pathways. We provide links to a variety of resources, both internal company resources and external content. So articles, books, videos. Even if you start this in a simple Google Doc, it will quickly become an invaluable resource. Try to allow anyone to add content, not just the admins. If one of your editors reads a great article, encourage them to share it with the group. This creates a living document. The more conversations that are had around data and analytics, the better. Degreed isn't just about tracking your learning. We're about connecting learning, skills development, and even internal mobility opportunities in one place. So we do direct our data champions to these analytical learning resources, but we're also able to flip the script. Who is reading articles on analytics? Who just read a book on data? Maybe they could be your next data champion. Let's look at some examples for your learning pathway, starting with what I would not recommend to include. Don't worry about the super detailed or technical topics. Your goal is to find resources that boost your editor's confidence and advance their data literacy. So topics like programming languages or regression modeling with significance testing or any kind of nonlinear forecasting, they just don't make sense. Find resources that will make an immediate impact on their charts and analysis today. Here are some examples of what I would encourage you to include. Start with the basics. Correlation versus causation. What's the difference? What are the dangers of overfitting a trend line to data or adjusting filters to get the results you want instead of just letting the data speak to you? What about outliers? Can you filter out an outlier? When can you and when shouldn't you? And my personal favorite, how do you pick an appropriate chart type? Let's dig into that one a little bit more by hopping into Domo. When you look at this chart, what do you see? To most people, they'd say, a not so great chart. But what makes it bad? Each company and each person probably has a different reason. Let's edit this chart together and see if we can identify some common areas of confusion. Let's start with the colors. What does this purple mean? If it doesn't have a meaning, maybe we should get rid of it. This purple is driven by this colors property. So I can click on it and see that right now, 6 of the months have been randomly chosen to fill as the color purple. I'm going to remove these color rules now. If I click next and then remove rules, we can get rid of that purple that didn't have any kind of meaning. Next, maybe your company isn't a fan of the months being in alphabetical order. A lot of people think of months as a chronological over time. So let's go ahead and get rid of this sort right here to stop sorting those months alphabetically. Maybe you want a legend or some kind of data label. I can go over to this legend property and see that I've hidden the legend that should be on this chart. If I unselect it, I can not only see the legend, but I can also see data values and give some numbers to this chart. Now, a lot of people aren't a fan of having a big pie chart with 12 slices. So you need to decide for your company and your team, how many slices are you guys good with? Maybe you only want to have pie charts for 2 slices, a true false either or scenario. Or maybe 5 slices or 10 slices, or maybe 12 is just fine. Pick what works for you and your team. These are all valid concerns, but I'm not going to tell you that there's only one correct way to show this data, because there's not. I can only define good and bad for my company, and then provide those guardrails to my editors about what my company is looking for. I would probably tell my editors that the original pie chart format has all the data, but it's kind of difficult to do a month-to-month comparison. So I'd recommend that they try a different chart type, maybe a line chart or a bar chart. I would point them to a resource, such as this one. It's one of my personal favorites about chart selection in Domo. I love it because of how I'm able to refer back to it whenever I'm talking to my Domo editors. Find resources that they keep referencing. If they read through an article and never give it another thought, that might not be a great resource. The best resources are the ones they can use time and time again. But that's enough talking about analytics training. This is Domopalooza. Let's talk about how we teach Domo. There are so many topics that you can cover about how to use Domo. We typically start with topics in these 2 areas. The first is foundational information. So what is the basic terminology that your company wants to use? Do you want to say card or chart, page or dashboard? This is your opportunity to train a new editor on what terminology you want them to use. This gets everyone's speaking the same language and on the same page. We'll also want to take a moment to introduce your editors to the new buttons that they have. Show them around the Data tab. Show them how they can see existing data sets. Where do they get started to work on new data sets that they want to add? Also make sure that they're familiar with the Analyze or Edit button, so they can hop in and start editing cards immediately. The second area we cover is more safety-related topics. A lot of new editors are hesitant to start building cards because they're worried they're going to break something, and they don't want to accidentally hurt or change an existing dashboard. Show them where their personal sandbox area is, where they can create things just for them and feel confident experimenting with new views. Also show them some getting started tips. How can they edit their first card? How can they copy an existing one in a save as functionality to their sandbox so they can tweak it and adjust without hurting the original? Finally, how can they move a card? So eventually this card has to make it to the work in progress area for peer review. So how do they actually do that? At the end of the day, they're gonna have lots of questions. And who do they come to when they have those questions and they need help? Is it the person giving the training or a different analyst on the data team? Make sure they know who they're gonna call. On the flip side, there's one big topic that I don't really like to cover in my Domo training, and that's actually building a bunch of cards together. A new editor will learn best by being hands-on in Domo and building cards themselves. Nobody really wants to watch an analyst click around to all the different chart properties. Let your editors drive. Let your editors be the one building those new cards and experimenting for themselves. Often, a new editor will have a particular chart in mind, but the idea of creating a whole new data set can feel a little daunting. We like to give our editors a head start with data by giving a collection of common, curated data sets ready to go. They are well defined, easy to understand, and they're available for every editor to use. Plus, it's a great way to cut down on requests for dueling data. Who wants to create a new data set when one is already there waiting for you? As an admin, you'll find that less and less of your time is spent on the chart side and more is spent on the data side, and that's a good thing. Let's take a look in Domo at some ways that you can label these common curated data sets. As a new editor, you'll probably start by searching for a specific name. But what if that's not enough information? We like to add prefixes to help us understand where a dataset is on the peer review process. A WIP prefix means that it's a current work in progress, and probably not the best dataset to use today. You could also use the labels. These are completely customizable. You'll notice that I filtered the datasets to just show the Domopalooza tag today. You could also use the tags. These are completely customizable. You'll notice that I filtered the list of datasets to just show this particular Domopalooza tag today. You can add as many tags as you want, so you have tons of options to how you can use these to guide your editors to always pick the right dataset for them. Now, let's talk about something cool, the little blue check mark. This is a certified check mark, and it means the dataset is certified company-wide. We use this company certification for our curated datasets. But you can set up whatever certification names you want. Maybe the finance team has a finance certification, and they can stamp any financial data sets with their approval. We can take a look at the second work in progress data set and see just how you would get it ready for editors if it got approved during the peer review process. We can start by removing that work in progress prefix. If I click into the options, I can easily edit the name and description. In this case, I just want to remove this prefix and click Save. I also want to get it its own little blue check mark and make it company certified. It's just as easy to request a certification. To submit it, I have to select how I want it certified. At Degreed, we only have one, company certification, but this is where you'd be able to select whatever certifications you have available. Your editors will always have more questions. Leverage your BI tool's existing resources. At Degreed, we don't have any kind of how-to guide for Domo, We just utilize all the resources that Domo provides us. Their Domo Help Center has a ton of options. We use their Domo University for courses, credentials, how-to videos, and it's a great resource. But my personal favorite is the knowledge base. I love how-to articles. And if I have a question like, how do I add annotations to a chart? Or how do I set up dataset certifications as an admin? I can go look up that how-to article. This also allows me to give an article back to my editors when they ask me a question. So instead of showing them how to add annotations, I can show them through an article, which allows them to go look up their next question on their own and take me out of the equation entirely. The more independent I can get my editors, the quicker they can get insights. And if I ever have something really interesting to ask, I've always got the Domo Dojo to ask a community of experts. While we don't need a lot of guidance on how to use Domo, we do have a lot of company-specific documentation around our internal processes. Every time we have a new chart that wants to be published, every time we have a data set that wants that blue checkmark certification, we want it all to be super well documented. That way we have confidence that everything is high quality and amazing. We have two main documents that we use daily to create confidence in our dashboards and our data. The first is our style guide. It focuses on look and feel. So we want consistency between dashboards. We also don't want any surprises in the peer review process. We want our editors to feel confident that they know exactly what is expected of them during the peer review process and what kind of dashboards will be approved and which ones we'll have recommendations for. To do that, the data team needs to make sure that the review process has consistent and well-documented feedback so they have a point of reference. The second document we have is our data dictionary, and that focuses on confidence in our data. And this is how we prevent dueling data and any kind of competing metrics. So what goes into a style guide? Well, first of all, what are your naming conventions? Elaborate on what you covered in your training session by writing down what those common terminologies are, and then get specific about what you want to see in Domo. So do you want to always have axes labels? Or chart titles, or how do you want to format your dashboard names? Are field names going to be in camel case or snake case? If you ask a room full of programmers which case they prefer, you will get a divided room very quickly. And then what about your color palette? Does green mean good and red mean bad? Or maybe your company color is red, so red being bad would just be confusing and not make sense. What about true and false values? Should true always be blue and false always be gray? Do you have some common groupings that you want to always be grouped in a consistent way? And maybe you have certain colors that should be attached to each of the values in that grouping. Like emails should always be blue. If so, write that down. And then what about your dashboard layout in general? Should you have a logo in a certain corner? Should you have high-level metrics at the top, detailed charts at the bottom, specific collections or sections? And then what about mobile accessibility? If lots of people access Domo from their phones, should taking a look at the dashboard from a phone be part of the peer review process? We think it's really important to have a style guide because it allows our participants to really trust the data they're seeing. They can very quickly understand what the charts are trying to show them, so that way the takeaways are what the data is, instead of them spending all their time trying to understand what the chart is even showing. Every company style guide will look differently, so make one that works for you. Let's hop into an example in Domo and see how Domo has tools that can help you create that consistency. Say you have a dashboard with these two charts. They both show values split by sales and adoptions, but the colors don't match. On the left, sales is in blue. On the right, adoptions is in blue. Let's hop into this pie chart and see if we can create a rule to fix this. If I click on color rules, I can set up a rule that when the type is equal to sales, it's always pink. Let's set that up now. I also want to add another condition because I want adoptions to always be purple. Let's click on New to add that condition as well. Now I'm saying that sales should show up as pink slices and adoptions as purple slices. But when I click Next, I get two options. I can either apply these color rules to just this card and just this pie chart, or I can apply these rules to all of my charts and create a consistent color rule that can be applied everywhere. I'm going to select to apply to all cards. That way, no matter what chart, if it's a bar chart, pie chart, if it uses this data set, it will use my pink and purple colors that I just set up. Let's save this card and see what it looks like on the dashboard. Awesome. Looks like our bar chart got the memo and is colored to match. Now sales are always in pink and adoptions are always in purple. So your participants never have to question what bar is what. They can very clearly follow the pink from the bar chart to the pink on the pie chart. Let's look at one more area we could also improve by hopping back into this pie chart. This pie chart is filtered to this year, but if you look at how it's defined by the year column being hard-coded to being 2021. What happens next year when it's 2022? I'd have to manually go into this card to update it. That doesn't sound very consistent and definitely doesn't sound very fun. What if I have a bunch of cards that use this year filter? Let's talk through two different options to improve this. One option is I could create an actual date field. This allows me to use the built-in date functionality where I can select any date range. Right now, it's filtering to any time period, but I can select that I want just the current year with just a couple clicks. This is built in, so I won't have to update it next year. Domo knows what year this year is and will take care of it for me. Now, maybe your year isn't quite equal to a calendar year. At Degreed, our fiscal year is slightly different than our calendar year. So we love having a use fiscal calendar checkbox. All I gotta do is check it or uncheck it, depending on what year I wanna talk about. An alternative is to set up a custom beast mode formula. I've got one ready here to show you. This formula is a little funky. It's essentially a year, but it's a 1-year delay. You can create any kind of magic in this formula, and by creating a simple true-false, I can say where it's true, I would like to include those rows, and where it's false, I'm not considering it to be this year. So maybe this year is something really crazy, like 2021 adoptions and 2020 sales. That's fine. I can create whatever logic I want and then use this beast mode as a filter. I can delete this hard-coded filter, because who wants a hard-coded filter? And drag over our new true and false filter. I'll also want to switch back my date range to being all time. So you can see the difference when I add this new delayed this year filter. My beast mode has two different outputs, the true and the false. By selecting true, I can filter down to just the rows that complex beast mode outputs. I talked about consistency a lot. And if we want to, we can use these formulas on a bunch of cards. So if I ever need to edit, I can just do it in one place. To add this beast mode formula to other cards, I can do it in just one click. On the edit screen, there's a checkbox called Share Calculation on Dataset. By clicking this formula will be a field option on every card within the dataset. And anytime you update it, it will update everywhere else as well. It creates one source of truth for this formula. And that way, this year will always be this year. Let's move over to the data dictionary. When building it out for the first time, don't feel like you need to jump straight to a ton of information. Instead, think of it as a continuously improving document. So start with just the what. What are the names of the data sets? What fields do they have? Where do they come from? And then move into more details. such as why do you have these particular fields in here? Give an example of the data that's in there, along with the description, and then move to talking about the who. If someone has a question about the data, who can they go ask? If they want to know how a field is calculated, or why it's named a certain way, or what credentials are used, who is the dataset owner? If they want to know about the source data and how it's viewed in the original application, who can they go talk to then? Who's the business owner? Every time we add a new data set, we always put it in the data dictionary. And if a dashboard in Domo is published and available company-wide, then you can guarantee that all of its data sets have been documented in our data dictionary. Let's talk a little bit more about dueling data and how our data dictionary can help us there. Maybe you've heard the term dueling data before and talking about competing dashboards that are using slightly different filters or terminology. But that's not the only place dueling data can live. It can live in just your raw data sets. For example, say you want to create a Mustangs data set. You want to know the number of Mustangs finding new homes each year. You look around and you find two strong candidates, the purple table and the pink table. We could fight over which one is the most accurate, but often they're both accurate, just to different people or departments. We can show both values and add flexibility by defining their differences and allowing the end user to see whatever they need. We do this by naming them differently and defining them in the data dictionary. Take advantage of colloquial terms that those departments are already using. Maybe the purple table is technically adoptions, whereas the pink table is only sales. By combining them into a green data set, everyone is happy and everyone can filter by whatever they want and they need. This allows your end user and editor to feel confident that the number that they're using is definitely the one that they're expecting. If a new team member joins the adoptions team, there's no question on which data set they should use. There's only one, the table at the bottom, the green one. And there's also no question about what field to use, because they can immediately look up that table in the data dictionary and see the definitions of the columns to figure out, hey, I want the adoption count because I'm on the adoptions team. Every time we have an addition, we need to scan through the existing data sets to resolve any dueling data concerns. We can do this through a peer review process. We have a revision planning version of our data dictionary where all of our work in progress dataset entries are worked on. When they're ready, we publish those entries to the live data dictionary. We like to move fast and continuously improve, so we release updates as soon as they're ready. But some companies may prefer having a regular cadence for when new versions go live. This applies to both new datasets and improvements on existing datasets. In our previous example, you might have had just one of those tables for a really long time, but you just onboarded a new editor from the other team. We can use the revision planning data dictionary to plan out how we can upgrade the existing dataset to one that has both sales and adoption data moving forward. We've covered a lot of training topics and examples today. We typically have an editor on board in about 1 hour. The goal is not to download the entirety of your data knowledge into the new editor. Instead, aim to provide them with links and clear direction about where to turn to when they have a question. We've talked a lot about upscaling your editors, analytically and how to use Domo, and on the process and procedures that make up your documentation. But I want to leave you with one extra tool in your tool belt, and that's learning how to be proactive in your error checking. What if something goes wrong? Whenever you open up access to more people, the chance for an error increases. Luckily, Domo provides us with some tools to combat this. You'll want to watch for both technical hiccups and user errors. If a password expires on a dataset's credentials, how can you find out about it today instead of 2 weeks later? If an editor tries to move a card to be peer reviewed and accidentally places it on a live published page instead, how can you find out today instead of when you see it in a presentation in 2 months? My number one piece of advice is to set up alerts. So let's take a look in Domo at how we can use those alerts. Say you have a goal of 50,000 Mustangs finding a new home. Today, you're at 39,000, which we can tell by this summary number in the top left corner. Let's say you want to be alerted the day that you hit 50,000. Let's add a new alert to make that happen. If I click on this alerts button, I can see that there's already one alert on this data set, but it's not the alert I want. I want a 50,000 alert. So let's add a new one. I can pick any metric to alert on, but in this case, I want it to alert on the summary number. I want to know when it's greater than or equal to 50,000 Mustangs. I can compose any message I want, and there's a bunch of metrics that I could add, but I'm going to keep it simple. Add a couple exclamation points, and we're ready to go. Here I can decide who I want to share it with. I'm just going to share it with myself for right now. There we go. My alert's been created. Now we have 2 alerts on this data set. You can see here the various icons for the different ways I can be notified when that alert is triggered. I want to just be notified by a push notification. So I'm going to unselect these first 2 icons and just leave the push notification. For this bottom alert, you can see that I'm going to be emailed whenever the animals change by 1 or more. If I click on it, I can see the alert history and when this is already triggered in the past. This is where I can see details about how often this alert's being triggered, as well as a step-by-step, these are the exact times that this has changed and the information for what that change was. This can be really helpful to be able to look back over time and say, hey, didn't I just fix this? Or didn't I just take a look at this? If you remember one tip about how to be proactive to errors, I hope it's this, and you go back and add a large variety of alerts. Another tip is to try to use service accounts. A lot of times errors on credentials are because there's tons of personal accounts linked on there, and it creates a lot of duplication. If you can have one set of credentials for your connector, that's a good thing, because Domo will allow you to share those credentials through Domo to any editor that wants to use it for a new connection. Formulas is another area that can get messy. So Domo has a manager tool where you can see all of those beast mode formulas that are used in your cards. You can use it to track consistency and check for duplicated formulas. Let me give you an example of how keeping an eye on formulas using the beast mode manager could really help your data consistency and prevent dueling data. This is an example from a previous company that I worked at. At this company, customers would submit support requests in the form of a ticket, and the average time to resolve a ticket was a huge metric and key performance indicator across the organization. Everyone used it, and it was a part of tons of conversations, presentations, benchmarking, you name it. I was tasked with creating an automated dashboard for this all-important metric. But what I found was an incredibly complex case of dueling data because no one could agree on what the definition of mean time to resolve meant. It could just be the total hours between created date and resolve date. But no, each team had created separate custom formulas for their personal team's mean time to resolve. This included things like excluding weekends, or excluding any time after 5 p.m., or maybe certain holidays would be excluded and other holidays could be included. None of these formulas were necessarily more correct than any others, but every team was on a different page, so leadership wasn't able to create a holistic view. Keeping an eye on dueling data through Beast Mode Formula Manager and your data dictionary could save you from this same fate. Lastly, I wanted to highly recommend that you create some kind of admin dashboard. There are tons of questions that you can answer using Domo's built-in connectors, and you can catch all kinds of potential issues this way. Go ahead and take advantage of the reporting on your reports, such as Maybe your data sets are updating in the afternoon, and so users aren't able to have that data first thing when they start their workday. Or maybe you can track when cards are skipping procedure and not showing up in work in progress and going straight to published dashboards. Or the reverse. They're never moving to a published dashboard and they're staying in work in progress forever. Set yourself up with a way to learn about how people are using your Domo, and that'll help you to make the most out of Domo. And don't forget to add some alerts on this page. The more you know about your editors and participants and how they're using Domo, the better you can support them, guide them, train them, and really upskill them into confident and curious data champions. So go out there and get upskilling. Once again, my name is Brittany Croft, and thank you so much for watching this workshop.